Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. We're going to be going through and building a full stack mean stack application in about an hour and change. My name is Valeri Karpov. I'm a software engineer at MongoDB, working on sort of continuous integration software as well as Node-related things, working on maintaining Mongoose and a few other Node-related projects. A little bit more about me. I'm actually the person who coined the term mean stack back in last year, April 2013. I maintain a few modules that we're going to be using in this workshop quite extensively. If you haven't seen them before, you'll be familiar with them by the end of the workshop, things like Mongoose and OmniDI. I also contribute to a few things like the Node MongoDB driver and mQuery, which is sort of a query helper for MongoDB that Mongoose uses. There will be a little bit of AngularJS in this talk, so yeah, there will be a little bit of client things, but it's okay, it's server track, so we'll be sticking primarily to server-side things. But I've been using AngularJS since version 0.9.4 way back when, because my mentor when I was an intern at Google is actually Mishko Hevery, the guy who wrote AngularJS, so I've been using it for a very, very long time. I have a few production mean stack apps out there. And in previous development roles, I worked in high frequency trading. I was a CTO of Level Up. I've done a few. I've been around in the development community. General outline. So what we're going to be building is a full stack single page application called Lean Mean, which is going to be a food journal. It's going to help you count calories and basically enter in, I ate this much of this food. It'll tell you how many calories that is. For those of you who don't know, and just so we're on the same page, Mean it stands for MongoDB, ExpressJS, AngularJS, and Node.js. It's a fun little acronym that symbolizes the union of these really cool hip technologies. And some additional tools that we're going to be using. Browserify is a Node module that compiles Node-style JavaScript into something that can run in the browser. Make is a simple automation tool. OmniDI is a dependency injector for Node.js. It simplifies the life cycle of creating long-lived objects and services. Mongoose is a wrapper around Node.js and MongoDB. Makes it a lot easier to sort of deal with MongoDB. And we're going to be using MongoDB's text search and Passport.js for Twitter OAuth. So you're going to get something like this. It's going to be a little bit gaudy because I like gaudy things sometimes, but anyway, wait for it to log in. And so I can track basically what I have eaten on a given day, and it will give me calorie outputs. So this is, I guess, what I ate while I was on my flight a couple of days ago. And today I can enter in what I ate today. So I ate some scrambled eggs. Guess 1 cup is roughly accurate, and I had some, pink cooked salmon. Well, there's another picture. And in addition to simply just building out this application, we're also going to dive into sort of how we're going to automate our workflow. Again, we have to use Browserify to compile some of the client-side code. So we need some sort of tools in order to make that easier for us. And to do that, we're going to be using Browserify and Make. And in addition to that, this is going to be sort of code that's built to actually be used as opposed to being a trashy hack. I haven't quite put this up in production yet, but I will sooner or later. And in order to make sure that our code is well organized, again, Browserify will help with that, as will OmniDI. So we'll dive into that. We're also going to have testing and benchmarks. And in the wise words of Kobe Bryant, this is an app that's going to try at least to have its big boy pants on. So step by step, this is going to be roughly an 8-step process. The simple steps are basically 1, understanding the data set that we're going to use. So again, the actual data for typing it that you saw where I typed in, I ate some scrambled eggs. All of that data comes from a USDA data set that's available for free online that I ported over to MongoDB. I have a blog post available on that, which I will link to at some point in this presentation. and we will go in and we will discuss sort of what is going on with this particular data set. And we're going to create and restructure our Express application in order to make sense for a single page app. We're going to build some models, build an API. We're going to build out the single page app routing. And we're going to unify the client, write some tests, and then do some authentication. And you can follow along with this on GitHub, github.com/vkarpov15/lean mean nutrition sample, or the slides for this presentation are up on my SlideShare and my Twitter, so you can easily just click on that link and follow along. Each GitHub commit is pretty exactly step-by-step, minus a couple of later bug fixes that I had to tweak. But yeah, so it'll be fairly easy for you to, or hopefully fairly easy for you to follow along. But also, feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions, concerns, or if I'm going too fast or too slow. Yeah. So first step is just getting the data set that we need to build out this application. So we need to have things like calories and all of these nutrient facts that we need to build out this application, and it's available from the USDA's website. You can use I ported this over to MongoDB, and if you download this presentation, you'll be able to basically click on that link, download the data set, and put it into your own MongoDB database using Mongo Restore, which is a utility that comes with your MongoDB installation that lets you take a sort of dumped file and put it back into your current MongoDB installation. And again, I also have a blog post about the data set that will explain in deeper detail what this data set actually is. And you don't really need a very deep understanding of what the data set is for the purposes of this presentation, but you're definitely more than welcome to go and dive in and explore it in more detail. For the benefit of this presentation, we'll go through sort of all the information that you need for building out this particular application. So what the data set looks like, basically it's organized into a bunch of food item documents. A food item is something that you might expect. It looks like this. There is a bison, which is a nice type of meat that I like to eat. It has a description. There's an associated ID and food group that come with the data set, but mostly what's important here is that each food item has roughly has a human readable description that is unique. And in addition to that, there is an array of nutrients for that particular food and an array of weights, which are common serving sizes for that particular food. So you don't have to estimate, how many ounces are in 1 cup or something to that effect. So you have to create the index once. After that, the index is going to get updated every time you update a document. So if a document has to, say, change position on the disk, the index will have to be updated. But you can run the create index sort of offline before you start your application. So in this case, like I've already long since created the text index, and either way, it runs pretty quickly because the data set is pretty small by MongoDB standards. Also, so if you want to read more about this data set, again, here's another link to the blog post. But just worth noting that in order to use text search and text search sorting with Mongoose, you will have to use at least Mongoose 3.8.9. Before that, Mongoose has a limitation where it can't quite do sorting by text score. So let's get started on actually building the web application, the fun part. So create an Express app. Probably have seen this before, but if you haven't, you need to install Express via npm, which is the Node package manager. Npm install express-g, and then running Express lean mean nutrition sample gives you a simple directory structure that looks like this. But with a single page app, this isn't exactly entirely the correct structure. You don't really need Jade templating. Again, you can have it, but it seems a little bit wasteful. So just junk the views folder entirely. We're going to also set up package.json in order to have our correct dependencies. So to set up the but something worth noting about developing Node modules is that package.json is not just for declaring your dependencies. It can also be a very powerful workflow tool, and sort of very successful NPM modules will make it very easy for you to get up and running with the package as easily as possible by basically all you have to do is do a git clone to pull down the repository. npm install gives you all the dependencies you need, npm test to run tests, and then npm start to start a server. So the important thing to know is that, or to understand, is like why you would want to do a single page app in the first place. Some people are very much against the idea, but I think that there's some significant advantages. For one thing, you have a bit less server throughput in the sense that your server never has to handle templating, and your server, all it's doing is serving up HTML and serving up JSON responses. So the browser can more effectively parallelize and do things like, okay, render HTML while there's an outstanding JSON request to load more data from the server. There's also cleaner separation of concerns. So your server doesn't have to worry about rendering anything. It doesn't have to worry about is it going to crash because the templating parameters are wrong. You're just outputting JSON and outputting a simple HTML file. And also, in some regards, you're getting less bandwidth usage, because whenever the user tries to go to a new page, say whenever I'm going between here and here, the HTML is only loaded once. So while this window is open, I don't actually, let me demo this from the network tab. So everything has been loaded. When I hit track, it makes a request for track.html. When I go back to home, it doesn't make any request for home.html. When I go back to track again, it's just going to make a JSON request and not re-request track, because Angular is going to cache the actual HTML that it needs to template that particular view. So you only have to transfer that once. And then after that, all you have to do is worry about transporting the JSON, which is relatively inexpensive. Also, it gives you more control over the UX, because again, the transition between views happens in JavaScript as opposed to happening on the page layer. So you can do things like show animations while the page is loading. So you can have a nice little swipe left effect when the user clicks on something, when the user clicks on a link, in order to sort of make your app look really cool and really slick. That particular thing is kind of outside the scope of this presentation, but it's definitely possible, and you're more than encouraged to look into it. And one more quick step, which I know I've been talking for quite a long time, and I know you're probably getting quite tired of this, but one last thing is talking about authentication with single page apps. It's something that always trips people up. So authentication, it's really easy when you use Passport, but of course you have to have a redirect, which may or may not be the correct behavior for your app. In this case, yeah, just whatever. Don't care about it. Might as well use a redirect. If you really want it to be part of your UX, it's slightly trickier. You have to again bake your own stuff. But well, if you're willing to tolerate the redirect, you can do it the same way that you normally would with Passport. Just make sure that you redirect users to the right place. But the more tricky bit is handling the cases where the user hits the API but isn't logged in. So both the client and the server have to be able to handle that particular corner case. So for app.js with Passport, pretty straightforward. I'm sure the mean guys will talk your ears off about, or the mean.io and mean.js guys will talk your ears off about using Passport. But just simple stuff. We have a cookie that's going to last for a week. That's going to determine what the user's session is, and this is basically all the setup you have to do in order to use Passport, in addition to adding a couple of middlewares and routes. So check login middleware, just fairly simple, gives you a 401 not author or HTTP 401 not authorized, and tells you to go to auth Twitter if you're not logged in. Otherwise, just go on to the next thing. And again, track controller needs to be modified a little bit to make sure that if the data has a redirect field, or if error returns something that contains a redirect field, we just redirect to that particular URL. And a little bit of, well, I lied. There's more Passport setup to be done. But what this is going to do, just create a Twitter strategy and two fields that are quite important. Where is this code? Aha. Okay. The two functions that you always have to implement with a Passport implementation is serialize user and deserialize user. These functions do kind of what they sound like, which is basically give me a unique identifier for the user and then give me a user back from a unique identifier. So for us, we'll just implement those with just MongoDB's user ID or underscore ID field. And we're going to create one more controller that's going to be included in index.html here. Or no, it's actually going to be part of all.js, my mistake. But it's going to be above all other controllers in the scope. And this controller is going to look something like what you see up here when the thing is done loading, or not. But it's going to create it's going to just define an object called scope.user, which is going to give you the ability to check what the current logged in user is, and the ability to query for, okay, who's the currently logged in user by pinging the /b route that we already defined, and also be able to reload it every I guess 60 minutes, which seems like a reasonable default. And for displaying the logged in user, it's fairly straightforward. It's going to be what looks over here. So again, that's my Twitter handle. That's going to show up right over here. Again, using the handlebars notation that AngularJS likes to use. So that's everything that we're going to talk about in terms of building out this application. Again, you're very much welcome to pull down the application off of GitHub. It's available on my GitHub. You can go around, play around with it. Again, review of what we learned: single page app with the bead stack using AngularJS for routing, and Browserify for building code building browser code from Node modules. Using Twitter OAuth, and of course using some very elegant MongoDB features such as text search in order to construct a fairly sophisticated app in a fairly short period of time. And of course, Mongoose gave us a very simple, very elegant API that we really didn't have to do much work for, and MongoDB 2.6 text search made the ability to search for food items very nice and simple. So thank you guys very much for listening. I'll take questions like right about now, but my Twitter is @CodeBarbarian. There's also my SlideShare. All of the slides from this talk are up there, and all this content is up on GitHub. Here's the link once again, and I also have a blog post on the data set and sort of a deeper dive into what's going on with that particular data set. So thank you guys very much.